мэдлэгээр жигүүрлээ. Mona English Bookstore. Сайн байцгаана уу саруулах хаант монголчуудаа 12 дугаар сарын маань ээлжид супер дугааруудын нэг нь бэлэн болсон байна. Greetings everybody. Here is another great episode of our Super December. And today we have one of the most 100 influential people in AI across the world, Mr. Benjamin Rosman. He's the founding director of MIND, which is Machine Intelligence and Neural Discovery Institute at the University of Witwatersrand. And, Lilapa AI, we were going to talk about the LLM. And in 2025, he was made a fellow of the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research and Learning in Machines and Brains. Thank you, Mr. Benjamin Rosman, for joining us.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And thank you for coming to our country.
Oh, it's an absolute honor. I'm loving being here.
Yeah? A little cold?
A little bit. It's probably the coldest I've ever been.
Yeah. Have you not been to Canada?
I have, and even I was in Canada a few weeks ago, and that was, quite mild compared to this.
Really? And you came in yesterday.
Yes.
And now you're here. And well, thank you so much. There's probably jet lags and everything, but hopefully we'll try to keep this conversation as interesting as possible, right?
I'll try to stay awake.
All right. So yeah, I just want to kickstart our conversation with you're working with AI, robotics, right? It's all kinds of research, and obviously artificial intelligence and human intelligence. When we talk about that, there's a lot of questions looming over what is to expect in the future. So I just want to start off my question with, what is intelligence?
That's a great question. And it's a hard question because I think everyone's got some intuition of intelligence, right? So, maybe that's, this person is really good at expressing themselves, or really good at maths, or really good at solving problems, or taking IQ tests. But it's kind of hard to pin down because there's kind of cognitive aspects, there's social aspects, there's psychological aspects. But really we tend to think of it as this basket term of how well do you as an organism or as an intelligent entity deal with kind of adapting to different changes and different challenges and solving different problems.
That is the epitome of human intelligence.
Exactly.
The adaptation.
Exactly.
But artificial intelligence, not so much.
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out and where we're going with it, right? Because, and this is where, we see all these debates about what counts as being intelligent. Maybe 20 years ago, if you'd ask someone about, imagine a technology that could tell you how to get where you want to go.
And that fits in your pocket.
Right, exactly. It's wow, that's so intelligent. Right. But now we just say, no, that's Google Maps or Apple Maps or something like that. And then maybe they'd be imagine a thing that you could talk to on your device and would respond and could send messages for you. It's no, that's Siri. Okay, but now what if it can search all of human knowledge and respond to you? Right. Okay, now we're getting to something that maybe people are less easy to dismiss, like your ChatGPTs and these kind of technologies. So we kind of often think something's intelligent, and then we build the technology and we're nah, that's just that technology.
Right.
But now we're getting into these more general purpose systems that's starting to be something that people more generally recognize as intelligence because, you think about the way we're dealing with AI these days, right? You're using your ChatGPT or your Claude or your Copilot or whatever it is, and you can give it all these different challenges. You could say, I need a new gym routine, or, I need to figure out a business plan, or, whatever it is, and the thing's going to help you work through that problem. So that's more like what we recognize in what you might say, that person's intelligent, is usually if they can help you think about difficult problems.
So, with AI leaders around the world, I want to know what the focus is now. In other words, what can we learn from biological intelligence that can be implemented into artificial intelligence? Because, with us, we have creativity, we have imagination, we have emotions. And it's not just asking gym routines. Are there things that you're trying to simulate from biological intelligence into artificial intelligence?
So that's a great question.
Thank you.
If we go back to the roots of AI, right? AI really kind of became a field in the 50s. And there were kind of two aspects to it, which I always liked. On the one side, we had this, what's now the computer science aspect or the engineering aspect, which is how do we build a system that can solve these really hard problems? Like, how do we build these devices? But then there was always the biological question as well of like, how do we understand natural intelligence, our own intelligence? The brain, this like squishy blob of jelly between your ears, is like the most complex object we know of in the universe, right?
Right.
And it's the thing that defines who we are.
Right.
But we don't understand how it works. And so that was like part of the root of it. Like, can we computationally think about this thing, this magical thing, and try and understand it? So there were always those two sides to it. And a lot of the way we think about modern AI is very loosely inspired by ideas in neuroscience of different kinds. So even the way our modern AI systems work, like our modern neural networks, are very much based on a kind of simplified abstraction of how brain cells send signals to each other. I mean, that gives us the magic of our ChatGPTs today. And so there's this long history of trying to learn from what nature has already done and build it into our technologies. Now, there's a lot to talk about here as well, because, on the one hand, there's so much more we still need to learn. We look at, people always talk these days about the energy requirements of these large language models, right? These huge systems, and how, all the big tech companies are now building power plants to attach to their data centers to produce enough electricity for that.
Because carbon-based meat does not require any
Exactly, right? So like your brain runs on like the energy of a light bulb, that kind of...
Or a banana.
Right? And like that's so radically, like, so much more efficient.
Right.
And so like, it's kind of like we're missing something. We've solved the problem in one way, but probably not the best way. Now, can we get smarter about the way we're doing that? So there's still so much to learn. But then there's the whole other world of things, right? So you spoke about creativity and emotion, right? The systems that we deal with now are really complex, okay? They've got their limitations, sure, but these are things that have the equivalent of like hundreds of billions of brain cells, right? These are complex systems that are really hard to understand. And the techniques people use to try and understand, like, what does this model know? What can it do? What can't it do? We use kind of techniques from neuroscience and from psychology to try and figure out, like, what is this thing capable of? So, people now, when they trying to measure in different ways how intelligent the system is, they'll give it things that kind of look like human IQ tests. We've been doing in our lab some work around like testing these with standardized tests in psychology. So we've been looking, one of my postdocs has been looking at, for example, how empathetic are some of these models. And turns out we give them standard empathy tests and they score more highly than humans do.
Wow.
And that's like super interesting. Like, why is that? We don't know.
Wow. It's crazy that a computer can be more empathetic than humans. And these models are being built already.
Exactly.
Right? Are they passing Turing, or the Turing test?
So Turing test is interesting. So this was this idea posited by Alan Turing, one of the kind of real initial thinkers in the space of AI, that, around the question of how do we know if something's really intelligent? And the setup of the Turing test was that if a human judge is talking to, say, a human and a machine and can't tell which one is which, then
that's what the Turing test
That's the
is.
Turing test, right? But this turns out is behavioral. So it's not saying what's going on inside the mind of this entity. It's just saying, like, can it mimic a human sufficiently well that we can't tell the difference? Now, it's kind of been argued for a while now that maybe that's not the best test. And I think by all means, like, many of the large models we have now basically pass it. In fact, the test has become a bit of a non-starter now because, in fact, if anything, you might say, I think this is an AI because it just knows too much. It's too good. It's like grammar and language is just too good. So that really, we've kind of blown past that test, and we're onto these other kinds of ways of thinking about it. Like, people ask these questions around really about specific angles of like competencies of, things like I said, on empathy, on creativity. We ask these questions almost more like you would ask about another human rather than a calculator.
За ингээд өнөөдрийн маань дугаарын спонсороор технологид суурилсан цахим зээлийн үйлчилгээний аппликейшн Гэрэл гэдэг гоё аппликейшнээс ажиллаж байгаа. Та одоо ингээд App Store болон Play Store-оос Гэрэл гэж хайх, эсвэл үзэж байгаа подкастын YouTube description хэсгээс татах линк дээр дараад Гэрэл зээлийн аппликейшн авсандаа суулгаарай гэж бас зөвлөмөр байна. Гэрэл гэж хайн шүү. Зээл авах хэрэгцээ гарахад та мэдээж өөрийн мэдээллүүдээ бөглөөд 24 цагийн хэдийдэн ч ердөө 3 минутын дотор одоо ямар нэгэн барьцаагүйгээр те цагаа хэмнээд одоо энэ зээлээ бол авах боломжтой. За мэдээж Гэрэл аппликейшны маань хэд хэдэн гоё давуу талууд бас байгаа гэдгийг хэлмээр байна. Зээлийн өөрийн хэрэгцээнд тохируулан хугацаагаа сонгож болно. Хидж хувааж авах боломжтой. Тэгээ өдөртөө давсан зээлээ бол эргээд одоо төлөвлөх үүгүй өдөртөө авах юм бол тэгэхээр нөгөө хідэн ч цагт байж болно гэдэг маань тийм гоё давуу талыг бол бий болгож байгаа. За тэгээд мэдээж та хариуцлагатай харилцагч байх юм бол дараагийн удаа зээлээ нэмж авч болно гэсэн үг. За тэгээд мэдээж Улаанбаатар хот болон 21 аймгийн төвийн харилцагчид цахимаар гэрээгээ байгуулах боломжтой. Гэрэл зээлийн аппликейшн таны санхүүгийн гэрэл. All right, so here's the thing. What is the purpose or the ultimate purpose of AI in a sense that does it have to imitate humans? Or, you've got people expecting this whole thing to reach singularity, where by 2045 or so, where they become billion times more powerful than human intelligence. Or, when we're talking about AGI, right? And because you've got an AI that plays chess and that beats Carlsen, the best chess player in the world. But it can only play chess. Right, and it can't fold clothes, but so that's what probably artificial general intelligence (AGI) is, and that's what we're headed. Now, I know Elon Musk talked about this as well. The power of AI, it's not superhuman. It's beyond that. So, its purpose, does it have to simulate our emotions and creativity and the things that we do, or behavioralism in general?
So this is interesting because I think it depends who you ask. As I said, that you go back to the roots of the field, and a lot of it was about trying to understand our own intelligence. And so there's kind of a strong school of thought in that the best way to do this is to be able to completely emulate it in circuitry. And it's not really ethical to cut open someone's brain while they're alive and poke different bits and see what it does. But you can do that with an artificial system. So
they did it during World Wars.
That's true. But, ethics wasn't quite what we'd like it to be then.
That's true.
So we can do this more easily with machines. And in fact, we're already doing this. So there's a lot of work now on in some ways, these systems are like human brains. In many ways, they're not. But this already gives us some insights into things like degenerative brain conditions and so on, because we can say, what would happen if, what would need to happen to see this kind of behavior change, or to see things getting forgotten in this way, and so on. So, there's that kind of aspect, which is about understanding our own brains. There's other people that spend their time building AI systems because they genuinely want to solve the most important problems in the world, right? So if we think about how do we as humans solve hard problems, we throw more intelligence at it. You go ask your really smart friend, or you pull your advisory board together, or something like that, right? So if we have more and more intelligence in our tools, that's how we solve harder and harder problems, like poverty, climate change, these kind of global existential risks, right? So many people think about that as being their driving goal. How do we provide healthcare to everybody, food to everybody, education to everybody? We want more intelligence in our tools.
Right.
And then there's people that are driven by these more theoretical questions of can I kind of really change the whole way society functions by building something super intelligent? And I think that talks to your question of, a lot of people thinking about like this kind of aim of AI is to be able to do everything that humans can do better than humans. And maybe that then takes us into like a post-work era.
Right. So when we're talking about just fixing world hunger or climate change or things, these are the practical applications that need to happen in the near future, right? Can we help our viewers imagine how AI would solve with food production? Like, for example, in Mongolia, we've got a huge pollution issue right now in the middle of the winter. So how would, hypothetically speaking, AI would solve that? And then the poverty and then everything else that we're talking about that humans can't.
Cool. So I think we can think about this kind of thing at many different levels, right? So let's start with like scientific discovery, for example. Like maybe we need better techniques to pull pollution out of the air, right? And maybe one of the ways to do that would be, can we design new materials that can absorb it, for example, right? Now, there's a lot of ways in which AI is already being useful in like material sciences and these kind of fields of chemistry where, people are trying to design these new molecules and new structures, but that's a hard problem. AI is being used to accelerate a lot of that kind of research. But on the other hand, there's other questions that are more kind of systemic about like, how do we put the right structures in place, like as a society, in terms of governance, in terms of policies? And, we could imagine AI helping us to simulate the effects of certain policies to choose the best one, or being able to help craft the right arguments to help get these ideas across, or to figure out what are the downsides of certain kind of policy decisions that we could take into account. And maybe some of these things are more operational, that involve like, okay, we've got different kinds of industries that aren't working well together, so maybe they can pipeline more efficiently, or even, AI could do some optimization and say what we really need is if we just had a certain set of pipes that were, instead of pointing this way, pointing that way, it would get caught up by different wind currents and taken out of this basin of attraction, or something like that. So you can imagine all these different levels of how we think through problems, from like really technical all the way through to like societal, where AI could have an influence.
Facilitate with the grunt work, if you will.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And, AI-based technologies that can help with, obviously, mass production of food, right? Especially with healthcare, I think there's a lot of...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, on the food, for example, you could think about, do we grow food optimally? Well, probably not, right? Probably we could do a better job of... You could imagine if you got the lighting conditions and the fertilizer and the water just right, you could probably get your crops to grow even a few % more efficiently or better. Right. And you can do this optimization with AI. And then you go to like healthcare, for example, and there's a lot of work we're doing in Africa now around like diagnostics, around triage, around new drug discovery, around just getting operations in a hospital to be working more efficiently, around digitizing healthcare records. Like each one of these things makes it a little bit easier to deliver quality healthcare to everyone, right? Particularly, you think about people in a rural community that might not have access to the top doctors that might be in your city centers. Like, do we have ways that they can still get their blood tests and things like that, and get like instantaneous results from that, right? So there's so many different ways that we could benefit just by injecting little points of intelligence all over the system.
Right. Speaking of exciting new discoveries, globally, we're going to talk about Africa and ultimately Mongolia as well. Just globally, what is an exciting phenomenon or new AI technology Well, that what is something that excites you the most that is being either built now or is soon to be in our lives?
Oh, I love that question, and then I never know where to start because there's so many
Okay,
exciting things.
we can talk about all of them.
Yeah, exactly. I think for me personally, something that ties into my research a lot. So my group focuses on kind of long-term autonomous decision making, and what we mean by that is, often if you look in the medical case, for example, there's a decision-making problem, which is, here's an X-ray. What disease does this person have? But that's kind of a once-off decision. That's like instantaneous. I just look at the data and I say, yes, no, or it's this condition or that condition.
You want it to be more thorough.
What you want to do is be able to think over a long period of time. So you could imagine in that healthcare scenario, what you'd really like to do is say, I think it might be this condition, but we should run this test. And based on the results of that other test, we would then change your medication like this or this. And then based on after a week or two, how you're responding, we might change your diet. And then we're going to change this. But if we get different results, we need to admit you to hospital. And then so on and so on. So there's this whole cascade of decision making that carries on into the future that we think about as humans. That's what our system, that's the kind of work that we do. So put another way, I like to describe this in terms of robotics. If your robot wants to make you a cup of coffee, or you want it to make you a cup of coffee, it's got to do a whole lot of things. And this involves moving its feet in certain ways and navigating around the building and opening doors and finding the mug and using the coffee machine. And every decision it makes depends on what it did previously and what happened. It's got to watch out for, it can't fall down the stairs, it can't spill your coffee. If it's out of coffee beans, it's got to go find them somewhere else. So there's this whole, again, chain of kind of logic that it has to go through. Now, this is what's important to be able to solve really hard long-term problems. If we look at what kind of our very widespread AI systems are doing now, these large language models, they're very good at, like, they've taken all of the knowledge of humanity on the internet and kind of compressed it and summarized it and put it together. And you can engage with that. You can ask it questions.
Right.
You can get it to restructure that knowledge in different ways. What I'm very excited about is bringing these two worlds together to say, how do we make these long-term complicated decisions that could have like important ramifications down the line, but incorporating human knowledge into this as well. I think the potential of that is huge. And even then, from an academic perspective, I find it very interesting because it's almost like that two different modes of thought we have as people, right? You can just, while talking to your friend, you can just say things that come to mind.
You switch it off when it comes to your parents.
Perhaps, yes. But then also, you sometimes, you've got to make an important life decision and you sit there and you think about it and you weigh up the pros and the cons and you think, okay, how would this affect my life long term? And how do we bring those two worlds together? And I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that over the next few years.
We're going to talk about LLMs in a bit. I think it's a fascinating concept. Let's just go back to the robot thing, right? Where, you can make a coffee. We'll ultimately probably have robots that a lot of people hope is that they will do your chores for you, right?
Exactly.
Clean your homes, wash this. Now, the more data it collects, the better it becomes, ultimately. And I think here's the difference. It will continue, if we're talking about a particular robot, it'll continue to get better and better with more data sets and more to work with. What we do with humans, sometimes we screw up. Sometimes our life takes a setback due to ill-advised decisions or just shit happens. Life happens. But with potential robots, they're going to keep being better. Isn't that a scary concept?
I think it is a potentially scary concept. I mean, one thing just on the way that it learns, what's interesting about this decision-making thing, which is often how we do learning in robots, is they actually also learn from trial and error. That they've got to learn by making mistakes. They've got to learn if you put your foot in the wrong place, you fall down.
Right.
And you try that a couple times, and then you say, okay, I'm going to stop doing that, which is similar to the way that children learn. And this is another place that we've gotten inspiration from, in this case, developmental psychology and child development in the way that our robots learn. But going back to your question about, isn't it scary? I think, yes, right? If we've got, this kind of maps the progression of technology that we've always seen, right? So technology has its ups and downs. There's the new version of Windows or whatever that comes out and everyone hates it and it sets things back a bit. But like the trend is generally
upwards.
Exactly. But now that's been at the scale of human developers and software engineers and companies learning from their mistakes. It's only in the last couple of years that we're at the stage where like the technologies are kind of learning from their own mistakes. Now, this isn't yet happening at the scale of by itself. Every time you interact with ChatGPT, it's going to get better. No, that still happens at the scale of the company running a new like training procedure to update it. But it's easier and easier. So the progress gets faster and faster there. And this is a potential risk for us in many different ways because, as I said earlier, these are such complicated systems, right? There's so much complexity because it's kind of like I'm interacting with you. Like, I don't know much about your internal thought processes. I'm guessing a lot of these things based on that, as humans, we've got a lot in common, right? But this is a more alien kind of thing that we're interacting with. We don't quite understand how it understands and how it thinks and how it learns. Like, we understand the principles, but not really what's going on under the hood. And so if this is changing, if it's dynamic, if like all the time different stuff is going on, it's even harder for us to like figure this out. And if you're trying to build a new world, but you've got this partner that you're collaborating with who's just getting like way smarter, like every time you turn your back, he's read like 20 new books. And, it's kind of an uncertainty we don't know how to deal with because you don't know what it's going to do next.
Манай подкастын хамтран ажиллагчаар ногоон ирээдүг хөгжүүлэгч MMS компани ажиллаж байгаа. Дэлхийд дахнаа мэдээж ногоон ирээдүр бол чиглэж байгаа. За тэгээд MMS маань бол мэдээж эрчим хүчний салбарт үйл ажиллагаа явуулдаг. Дэлхийд дахнаа бүгдээрээ sustainable development, доктортой хөгжил гэдэг энэ утга санааг бол мэдээж маш хүчтэйгээр ярьж байгаа. Монголд анхны ногоон барилгын төслийг маш амжилттайгаар хэрэгжүүлсэн MMS-ийн хамт олон маань манайхтай бол ингэж хамтарч бол ажиллаж байгаа. Энэхүү бүтээн байгуулалт нь мэдээж ажилчдын эрүүл, тав тухтай ажиллах орчин бүрдүүлэхээс гадна Монгол тийм ногоон барилгын цоошин соёлыг бий болгосон ийм гайхамшигтай бас байгууллага маань бол байгаа. Ийм гоё төсөл бол хэрэгжсэн гэж бол болно. За тэгэхээр та бүхэн бас MMS-ийг сонгороо. Эрчим хүчний оновчтой цогц шийдлийг MMS. This is more of a personal opinion question. Just building on that, the general idea here is that AI keeps getting smarter and smarter and smarter, and then keeps becoming more powerful to the point where ultimately it can solve problems that humans couldn't. Everything, maybe even defy the physics of law. I think it would be presumptuous to not think that it would be able to do it, not think that they would be able to do something that we couldn't. I mean, we probably should think of it in a sense that it could solve many problems. It could just solve everything. How much of an optimism or realism is there when it comes to that?
I think this is one of the hardest questions of our time.
I'm sorry, because I know we're talking about the near future thing, but like I want to like imagine the ultimatum.
No, totally. And so I think firstly we've already seen amazing things just come out of this technology. And just like a couple examples, there was the very highly publicized Go playing system from Google DeepMind, AlphaGo, a few years ago, that beat Lee Sedol.
The best player in the world.
Yeah, exactly, the best player in the world. And like there's this documentary about it, and there's this moment where it takes a move that everyone thinks, well, that was a really dumb move. And then nobody would have done that. And then suddenly it becomes clear that was like, in fact, I think Lee Sedol even said like he was perceiving a new kind of intelligence at that moment. This was something no human would have done, but it completely changed everything. And kind of he commented, it's like you're learning something new from the system, right? So there was just one glimpse of like a kind of creativity, a different kind of thinking. And then you can pan to a different kind of technology, in fact, based on the same ideas, which was something from the same branch of Google called AlphaFold, which is a system that can kind of predict in chemistry what happens if you've got a molecule, like a really complicated molecule, and the way it folds up. I mean, I'm not a chemist, but my understanding of this is when you're designing a new molecule to do something important, you want the important bit sticking out and not sticking in, so that it can interact with...
That's probably it.
...with the other elements, right? But this is a really hard thing. Like if you've got this really complicated molecule, to figure out how it folds in 3D space is a really hard problem. So this thing just like could compute, and they released publicly the 3D structures for 200 million molecules, right? Wow. Basically permanently solving that problem for humans. So whenever someone was like working on a new drug design, this would be like months of work to figure this out for the different ideas they were trying. Now this is just all publicly available, and there's a tool that can just compute this for you. So, we've got these kind of things. And again, this is kind of a superpower that we never had before. So what does it mean to have this kind of stuff?
Right.
Like,
I mean, look, we can talk about the positives and the negatives, right? Obviously, with positives, healthcare, food production. The negatives, obviously, the privacy, security threats, devaluation of humanity, all of that stuff. Obviously, the optimists would say we have always utilized technology to our benefit. There's always drawbacks, but we have enjoyed the advantages of cars, for example, the escalators, X-rays, the medical advancements. But this one is the first technology that might be autonomous. And what kind of precautions should we take? How do we deal with the ethical dilemmas? For example, if there's a self-driving car and then it runs somebody over, instead of running multiple, how do you hold them accountable?
I mean, this is interesting. As you say, this is like the first technology that has a kind of agency to itself. Right? Maybe it chose to do that. I mean, to some extent, without getting too philosophical, it did choose to do that. Yeah. Like it weighed up some data and it decided this was the correct course of action. And this is hard, right? Because this could be at any scale, like from an autonomous car to, a power plant. How do we think about that? And I think this is an important kind of really question for us to tackle now. I mean, we've kind of posed these as like hypotheticals for a long time. But, in many cases, now your car behaves in that way, okay? Up until a few years ago, if your car did something like that, you'd blame the car manufacturer. Right. But now you'd say maybe it was the algorithm inside the car that did that. But actually, maybe it wasn't. Maybe because all the cars were learning from each other's data, there was a bad driver on the other side of the country that kept doing this crazy stuff. And for some reason, it learned from that data to do that as well, right? Maybe that person's like responsible. But that's like all mixed in the complexity of the system. Like we can't figure out exactly what the cause or effect was of this kind of thing. It almost kind of mirrors this like philosophical question of, if a human does something bad, is that because they're a bad person? Is that because they're something more complex? Is there like something in their neuroanatomy that they're a victim of that caused them to behave this way? And I like this mirroring of like us asking more like philosophical, deeper questions of ourselves. Like, why do we behave in certain ways? I think we need to think about this, right? Because if a system's behaving in a bad way, you probably want to recall it in some way. You don't want it to carry on behaving dangerously because society is at risk. You got to figure out like, is accountability important, or is fixing it important? Is it important to have systems in place that can like help anyone who was affected by it? Like these are maybe bigger than just the technology itself, and more, how do we think about society? And I think this mirrors also how we should move forward as a society in general. Like if we've got new technologies that are able to fully control or optimize our food production, for example, how do we make sure people benefit from that? So there's the flip side of like the accountability, but also distributing the benefits. And I think this talks to needing to rethink our relationship to our technology. And again, maybe it's a thing that we can hold accountable for stuff, but we got to think more fundamentally about our relationship to that technology. Like it's almost like it's on the path to becoming a fundamental component of our society rather than just a tool we use.
Right. There's the ethical issue with any advancements in technology, right? So going back to the philosophical aspect, how does philosophy, this is more of a personal opinion question, help shape your view of machine learning and cognition in general? And what can AI learn from the poets and the writers? And it might come down to what makes us humans, the existential contemplation, or I want to dig deeper into the philosophical aspect, because a lot of people's fear are based on that, right?
I like this because I think if you look at like any culture and any tradition, particularly ancient ones, like this is something humans have always grappled with. Like, who are we? How do we work? Why are we here? What is our positioning in the universe? And we've had many different answers along the way, but in some way these kind of questions have now like been brushed aside off into the humanities to think about. But I think it's really core now. Like, so one aspect of this is people often define themselves by the work that they do. So you meet someone and you say, hi, and you introduce yourself. It's like, who are you? And they'll say, oh, I'm an accountant, or I'm a lawyer, or I'm, but is that really who you are, or is that the thing that you do? And how tied together are these two questions? And if suddenly you had a machine that did that job for you, then who are you? And I think what's cool is it's the time now, and this is something I get excited about. It's the time now to come back to these questions, which we probably should have a long time ago. I think a lot of the modern world is grappling with this sense of identity. That, there are these kind of loneliness pandemics around the world. There's people having a lot of these like almost existential crises of who are they, what is their place in the world, and so on. Because we often, certain communities and sub-communities think about this, but I think as a global society, it's something that I don't know if we ever had the answer. We've just lost sight of this being an important question. But because now we've got a technology that looks so much like us and can do a lot of what we can do, it makes us have to answer these questions of like, what is it to be human? And these are the questions that like fields like philosophy have been thinking about for a long time. So I think this gives us some tools to tackle these questions. And then the flip side is also interesting, because if you look at areas like philosophy, that they were, traditionally people just staring off into the sky and thinking. We can even now like simulate some of these. We could say, oh, what if people did this, or what if people did that? And we could, build little simulated worlds and see what the impacts of different things. If you believe that humans always do that, or should always do this, or would like to always do the other thing, we could see what the effects of these decisions are. So I think there are these new areas that are starting to merge around like computational philosophy, where and we're even doing this in our university now. We're getting philosophers and computer scientists to kind of become friends and say, like, can we emulate this? Can we test this theory? Or you've been thinking about these things for hundreds of years. Could we try and take some of those principles and inject that into our AI? Maybe we could make it more moral or more ethical. And I think this is an exciting new area, because those are disciplines that never had any way of like meaningfully having conversations, but like our artificial brains give us this tool to be able to unlock those doors as well.
Нэрэ манай подкастын хамтран ажиллагчаар BSB Mebel бас хамтарж байгаа. Европын 30 гаруй улсаас одоо гэр ахуйн одоо тавилга, бууданг одоо албан ёсны эрхтэйгээр импортлж оруулж ирж байгаа. Би маргааш өдөр 19 BSB орж буудан авж байгаа. За тэгээ манай Яармгийн BSB-ийн салбар чи юу вэ? 5500 м2 талбайтай. Өстой төрөл бүрийн сонголт байгаа юм байна лээ. Зочны өрөө, буудан, унтлахын өрөө, хүүхдийн өрөө, галтгоо, ширээ сандал, хивс гэдэг одоо нөгөө айл чин сайн нөгөө шинээр нүүж орсон чи ямар их юм хэрэг болдго юм бэ. Тэгээд BSB-гийнхэн маань бас энэ дээр хамтарч ажиллаж байгаадаа их баяртай байгаа. За тэгээд та бүхэн мэдж байгаа бол 19-т бол байгаа. Тэгээд ТБД андуудын урд байгаа. Мишель Экспо дээр тэгээд одоо Яармагт одоо шинэ салбараас хэрэглэгчтэй өргөх гээд. За энэ сайхан үйлдэл нь одоо манайхтай бол хамтарч ажиллаж байгаа. За тэгээд ер нь бол одоо гэрийн бүх хийл хэрэгцээ энэ цахилгаан бараач байна. За тэгэл зээлээж газар дээр шийдүүлж болж байна. За тэгээд энэ шинэ BSB амар том BSB үл. Яг Яармгийн зам дээр хахад андчгүй 3 дахь автобусны буудлын ард нь хорс моторсын хажууд байлээ дээ тий. Тэгээд манай BSB-гээр бас өөрчлөлөөрэй.
FSC сертификаттай. Цэвэр царс модон. Эрүүл мэндэд сөрөглөөгүй. 100% эко Европ тавилгууд зөвхөн BSB Mebel. Хаяг Яармгийн 3 дугаар автобусны буудлын ард хорс моторсын баруун талд BSB Яармаг мол салбар.
You previously mentioned about like 20 years ago forget about 50, right? 20, 30 years ago, if you could go back in time and tell them about the technology that we have, everyone's jaws would drop, right? And if we look 20, 30 years into the future, I've asked this in some way, but again, is there, as a society, what is something that may not seem normal now, but something that we could expect, right? Because we like to talk about flying cars, or now they're talking about making superhumans through genetic engineering, right? And is that feasible? And what about space travel around the world? The using AI, and we're going to go into combining with the quantum computing in a little bit. Just all of these exciting new phenomena merging together. And how do you envision that future in the next 20 to maybe 50 years?
It's like sci-fi is real now, right?
The future is now.
Exactly. I think it's the most exciting time to be alive for these reasons. I'm going to go back to the jobs thing, because this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about. The kind of AI systems that are being built now are about being general purpose. And to a large extent, when we talk about artificial general intelligence, that means being able to do anything that a human can do at like a human level of proficiency. And we're seeing this now in more and more industries, in everything from law to advertising to education to medicine. More and more, there are these results coming out saying, ooh, at this task, AIs are now better than people. right? So we're seeing this in more and more places. Now, the way this is confronting us at the moment is as a challenge, because it's like it's taking away jobs from people.
Right.
But the future I would like to see would be one where we say, okay, we've done this. AI took away all the jobs. No one has to work for a living anymore, which is like a radical concept, because like most of human history has been about
Working.
exactly working. Like every human has to do a thing that they probably don't like, at least a big percentage of it. You know, maybe you choose your profession because you're excited about the kind of concept of it.
Probably one of the purposes of life in general too.
Exactly. But like, you know, you go into HR or you go into medicine or something because you're passionate about working with people, or you're passionate about curing people. You're probably not passionate about like all the administrative work behind it and that kind of thing.
You didn't wake up one morning and that was your dream job.
I want to stamp forms all day long. Right.
For most people.
And that's what we do, right?
Right.
So most people do work that's like, you know, not good for them psychologically or emotionally or physically or something. But so you could imagine, like, we could automate these things like in the next however many years. And maybe no human should have to work for a living. Now, if you say that now, you sound like a crazy person.
Right.
But I think if we do things right, then we could build a positive future based on this, where no one has to do a thing, right? The problem isn't the doing the thing. It's the fact that the doing the thing is tied to your paycheck, which you need to feed your family. So where we'd like to be, I think, is somewhere where all the work gets done, and that frees us up to do what gives us value. If the thing that gives you value is still interacting with people every day, or, you know, whatever it might be, designing new things, right? It's not that you have to do it, it's you doing it because you like to do it. And I could imagine a future world where that's the case, where everyone gets to find their own purpose in whatever gives them enjoyment. We solve the problem of how, you know, the economic resources transform and move around society with value being provided by AI. We then get to just focus on this question of human value. And I think I would hope that over the next few decades, this becomes a bigger and bigger question of like, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? How do you want to spend your time? And it's not tied to, but will this provide enough income to feed my family?
Right. I mean, personally, I would want to live in that utopia, right? Unfortunately, in a capitalist society, human value is largely measured by the economic value and input the one has. Like, how would that be feasible in the society that we've built economically?
So this is a difficult problem because, you know, the way we do that is like, your value is in doing the thing better than other people do the thing, and that gets you more money. Now, the big question that I think we'll be confronted with in the next few years is, what does it mean if the human, like, so for now, like, you want to be the best at doing the thing, but what does it mean if a human will never be the best at doing the thing and there'll always be a machine that's better, right? I hope that this, like, gives us some humility to say, well, then the machine should do the thing. And if we're seeing this happen in every single one of our professions and every single one of our disciplines, we're going to grapple with this a lot, because it's like a direct challenge to who we are as people, which is why I think it's important that kind of collectively as society, we need to have this kind of moment where we start reflecting on this and saying, okay, this is what's happening with our technology. What do we want the future to look like? Do we want this to happen to us? In which case, what we might see is just more and more jobs being automated away, our unemployment climbing, they're putting more strains on our, like, social safety nets and so on. And I think really, like, pressuring our, like, systems that have never been built for this kind of thing to happen? Or can we be more proactive and say, okay, we can anticipate this coming. can we start figuring out how to integrate these changes in a way that's a bit more seamless, puts a bit less strain on the system? Because this is going to happen one way or another, right? We can look at the kind of exponential progress of this technology, and again, how it's impacting on every single field, and say, okay, if we just extrapolate this out over the next few years, where does that take us, and where would we like this to take us? So we're getting this like huge amounts of new resources, again, in whatever field you're working in. How do we start this transition? Maybe that's starting to make the working day shorter for people. Maybe that's, I think there's a lot of things we've got to grapple with there, but either it's going to happen to us or we can make sure it happens in the way we'd like it to.
We'd like it. Just, I mean, just like with previous technology, right? The 9 to 5 has been implemented by, I think it was Henry Ford, and the working condition was way worse before that, right? Well, I want to also ask your opinion about this. Guys like Elon Musk and Sam Altman and the Google's 2 co-founders, right? Sergey Brin, Larry Page, and then guys like Zuckerberg. What do you think is their vision? What are they trying to achieve in their lifetimes? They're investing so much money into whether it's OpenAI or Google doing the AGI, everything. So what are they trying to accomplish there?
I think it's difficult to tell, right? So to get into the mind of someone else is always hard.
Well,
but
let's base it on the data.
Right,
like the AI.
Exactly. I think the challenges there are you've got a lot of competing things going on there. On the one hand, it's funny, you can have these visions about the future, and I believe many of them do, and I believe many of them want to see a better world, because most people in AI believe that this is a technology that can be used for good. Many of us worry that it can be, like, there's huge risks associated with it that could affect all of society, but the decisions we made to get into it generally around the idea that like adding more intelligence to a system improves it, and the world could definitely use some improvement. But I think if you're in those kind of positions of these kind of leaders of these big companies, you've also got to make sure that like you're staying on top of the game. You've got to be investing in the right kind of way. You've got to, even if you're completely altruistically minded, you might not think the other guy is. And so you want to make sure you win the race to it. And so I think they would like to see, I think they've all got different versions of this reality they would like to see happen. I suspect because of their depth of involvement in whichever company it is, they believe that that's the vehicle that will carry us to that future. Some of them are more involved in kind of societal efforts. I believe that this needs to be something driven by the population rather than individual tech companies. I think that they're an important part of it. Those are like the powerhouses of our innovation, but I feel like the way that those technologies get integrated into society needs to be more driven through society rather than just like top down from the tech companies. I suspect their views are quite different on that issue.
За тэгээ хэсэг завсарлагаа дуртахад манай подкастта хамтарч ажиллаж байгаа өөр нэгэн байгууллага бол Nura байгаа. Хиймэл оюун ухаанд суурилсан юм шинжилгээ авдаг газар. Би бас өөрөө Nura-гаар бас үйлчлүүлж ирсэн. За тэгээд орчин үеийн технологи тулгуурлан одоо таны биеийн эрт үеийн өөрчлөлтүүдийг бол бүр ирлүүлэх боломжтой. Бид нар бол хиймэл оюун ухааны ач холбогдол аюу их ярьдаг. Маш их датаг цуглуулж авч хэрхэн зөв мэдээлэл боловсруулах вэ гэдэг. Тэгээд одоо Nura-гийнхан маань бол 400 сая датад сулгуураас Ryle гэдэг хиймэл оюунд суурилсан шинжилгээ хийж байгаа. Таны бие цацрагийн ачаал багтаа баг тунд тодсгогч бодисгүй компьютер томографийн шинжилгээг хийж байгаа. За зүрхний титэм судасны кальцийн оноо, уушигны архаг бөглөрөлт өвчний эрсдлийг тоон үзүүлэлтээр наривчлан гаргадаг. Ингээд та одоо бие үзүүлээд ингээд маш тийм наривчлсан үр дүнг бол харж болно шүү гэдгийг хэлмээр байна. Эрт илрүүлж эрүүл амьдрий. Nura төв.
Эрт илрүүлэх нь эмээх зүйл биш. Харин ирээдүйдээ итгэх итгэл юм. Эрт илрүүлж эрүүл амьдрий.
Do you think with online content, Do you think it'll be filled with AI where we can't distinguish between what's real and what's AI, and then that we will ultimately just be, just bombarded by just full of AI content, and then our contents get lost, our as in humans. Do you think that's the kind of future? Do you worry about that?
I mean, I look at my social media and that's exactly what I see already.
Exactly, right?
And I'm sure you see this, like you see a video and you're like, is this real?
Right.
Is this AI slop? I don't know. And it's crazy that it's hard to tell already. And we're like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years into this new era.
And what about the next 3 or 4?
Right.
And then the 10?
I think we're going to have to get better at this, right? Because we've seen over the last decade or so just how divisive like our online ecosystem can be. And I think this is this thing of like, with great power comes great responsibility, the Spider-Man and all that, that we've got this amazing technology, but we're running like brain software that's thousands of years old,
Right.
and somehow these things aren't meshing. So we got to figure this out, right? Part of this is, I think it's just going to be harder and harder to tell the difference. Like,
Right.
you can't tell if someone really wants to do good AI generated, like definitely text. Images are pretty much there. Video will be there soon. Like, we're never going to be able to tell. The way you've got to do this is either you build a technology that helps you validate and says like, okay, this news article, is it validated with like other articles all over the place? Does it meet certain standards and so on? I think that's maybe one way to do it. Another way is to kind of watermark when stuff is AI generated. I'm a bit skeptical of that because I don't think you'll ever get every single model doing this. I think we're going to have to build a new culture for ourselves around like trusting content. I mean, I think as it is already, we've all got like those relatives that like, they'll send you something in a WhatsApp group or something.
Right. And
you're like, say to this uncle or whatever, like, come on, that's a conspiracy theory,
Right.
or that's totally not true. Like, we need a better culture of how to have those conversations and maybe be a little bit more skeptical of things. But
Yeah.
I don't think that's a technological solution. I think that's a societal kind of solution.
Right. I guess it's kind of like 10 years ago, we had to deal with distinguishing fake news, right?
Yeah.
What's fake from what's real. And then 20 years ago, it was just the start of social media. And then 30 years ago, we had to explain what the internet was. And so it's just another new challenge with the AI, distinguishing from
It just
what's
gets harder and harder.
right. It just gets harder and harder. Give me a ballpark number. From how many years from now do we expect a robot that is in our daily lives, whether they be house cleaning or girlfriend, boyfriend, right? Because we keep talking about them. Yes, we're talking about the software applications, but what about the hardware stuff that will easily be in it? I mean, I don't want to talk about the self-cleaning vacuum cleaners.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
these are not new to me, right? I'm talking actual robots. Do you have a ballpark number there?
So we always say like the robotics thing lags behind the AI thing because the physical world is hard.
Right.
But in the last few years, there've been a number of startups that are making huge progress in this space. I would be shocked if the technological problems weren't largely solved in less than 10 years.
Wow.
I think I'm less sure about like the kind of manufacturing and like the logistics of getting that out into the world, doing it affordably, but also the costs of these things. 10 years ago, you'd look at a humanoid robot, like a robot with a human form factor, and that could cost, I remember the department I was kind of working with at the time, or just before, in the UK, got one of them and it cost something like £2 million. Now you can get kind of the state-of-the-art robots will be like $50,000 right? Which is a crazy reduction in cost.
Yeah, and I will get them by the time they're $50. I have to wait. It's kind of like the computers, right?
Exactly. But like now they're in the range of like a car,
right?
right? And I suspect like I don't know if, you're going to get this complicated piece of hardware for like $50, but like, I don't know, say $10,000 for like the thing that can do anything you want in the world. Like, maybe if we're in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, like maybe that'll be in the next 10 years as well. But I think you're definitely going to see the YouTube videos of it doing like all the stuff you want done. And we'll just be like, oh, I can't quite afford it. But then maybe, more and more companies will start getting one. At first, they'll be a bit gimmicky and they'll say like, ooh, this insurance company got one and they use it at like conferences and to greet people coming into their buildings. But then you'll more and more find like, oh, a coffee shop started up where they've got one of these robots making the coffee for you, and then a restaurant, and then a hotel, and then, I think you'll find it like this. The challenge in robotics has always been the high price point makes it hard to sell a lot of them. And they always struggle to find like the killer app for the robot, right? The vacuum cleaner thing was easy. Like you get the cost down, like it cleans your floor, that's the thing. But you build this complicated thing that looks like a human. What's like the like big application that makes it worthwhile? Well, maybe that's easier if the prices come down so much that people just buy it and do whatever with it, and then someone's like, oh, this is amazing at setting the table every night, and then they tell their friends who tell their friends. But I really think in the next 10 years we'll see this starting to happen.
Speaking of robotics and going back to the ethical question, I think we have to redefine our ethical moral values when it comes, like, what if you were to cheat on somebody with a robot? Is that considered cheating? Right. I mean, these are the things that we have to redefine, no?
I think so. I mean, we've already got people having like their AI girlfriends and boyfriends, at least what I read online. And I think you're going to find people starting to campaign for like human AI marriage. And like, it's going to be weird, right? Because again, this is what happens when we like encountered with other beings. It's like we've brought aliens to our world, right? Because it's like this alien technology, but they communicate in a way that's familiar to us. They can kind of look like whatever we want them to look like. But this is like the Wild West days. We don't know how to deal with any of it. But yeah, you're right.
I've briefly mentioned the singularity thing. Potentially being billion times more powerful than human imagination. Do you think we will reach that ever?
So we often talk about, I mentioned earlier, artificial general intelligence, AGI, being the point where an AI can do like all the cognitive tasks that a human can do.
And not just specialize on one thing.
Exactly. Which was like the history of AI. We can get it really good at playing chess, but as you said, the chess player can't also fold your clothes. But then we talk about artificial superintelligence, which kind of is a bit of a looser term, but people roughly mean like an AI is as good as like a society of smart people. Now, I see no reason we wouldn't get there. And I kind of think of it this way. Like, firstly, if we get to like this general intelligence, which I think in some ways we're pretty much in the realm of doing that. Your ChatGPT, like, I don't know, I can do many things better than it, but it can do many things better than me. I don't know. I think in some ways maybe we're roughly similar intelligence.
We're dependent on it to a certain extent.
Exactly. But now, if you take that thing and make it 1,000 times faster, give it access to even more information, get it better integrated into our world, get them talking to each other seamlessly and updating each other based on every conversation they're all having. Like, I see no reason why we can't just keep dialing that up and up and up, that it becomes as smart as a handful of people and then a bigger group of people. That it doesn't feel like there's a huge phase shift it has to go through to get there. It's more like we just keep doing the same thing, but at a bigger scale.
The reason that I asked that is because, okay, let's say we get there. And do you think the benefits of that development outweigh the drawbacks?
That's a tough question. I'm not sure. I think it depends how we get there. And this is kind of, as I was saying earlier, is this a thing that happens to us or happens with us?
With us. Right.
I think if we if there's like resistance, if this is pushed on by the interests of big tech or large governments, and society has resistance to it, and then there's challenges and fights and unemployment and this kind of thing, I think it could be very messy. And I think like along that way, you could imagine that the kind of aims of the technology aren't necessarily aligned with people. But I think on the other hand, if it's built in a very collaborative way, that we've got like the whole of society as stakeholders, that we're having these discussions like we're having now at large scales, and everyone's getting the chance to weigh in on it. We've got more and more people that are not just using AI in their lives, but are contributing to these discussions and how they think value should propagate. And we're building the right kind of infrastructure as a society as the technology develops. I think it's very likely that we'll build this in a way that's going to be just generally beneficial to all of us.
Манай подкастын хамтран ажиллагчаар Active Garden ажиллаж байгаа. За Active Garden маань бол барилгын салбартаа яг цагтаа гэдгээр онцлогтой, яг цагтаа ашиглалтанд ордог. 1-р ээлжнээс 4-р ээлжийн барилга хүртэл ингээ цагтаа орж байгаа. Би ч гэсэн өөрөө ямар ч байсан тэнд байр худалдаж авсан байгаа. За тэгээд мэдээж бол одоо яармаг нисгийн чиглэлд бол энэ тал дээр бол үнэхээр жишг болж байгаа. Энэ маань өөрөө давхар үн цэнийг бол бүтээж байгаа. За тийм учраас ч гэсэндээ Active Garden бол одоо миний хувьд бол одоо сэтгэл ханамжийн хувьд бол маш өндөр ийм гоё сонголт байгаа. Сая 10 сарын 31-нд 4-р ээлжийг ашиглалтанд бол оруулсан байгаа. Тэгээ та бүхэн ч гэсэндээ Active Garden дээр байр сонирхож ивэл 75 55 55 тэгтэг дугаарт холбогдорой гэж хүсэж байна. I've read one of your interviews, and you've talked exactly about that, where we've got a super powerful technology. Can it be democratized to the public, or should it be in the hands of the few? And then I think the realistic way of looking at it is large corporations, the ones who have money, usually control the big powerful technologies. And is that, I mean, leaving it to the hands of the public, is that even the right decision, right? And is there a possibility that we can build a weapon that's 100 times more powerful than the hydrogen bomb, for example? And is that a legitimate worry?
It's interesting. This is a big kind of philosophical debate.
Right.
On the one hand, you don't want this all the power concentrated in the hands of a few.
Right.
For obvious reasons.
Right.
The benefit of that is if you've got the right regulatory environments, it's easy to control what's happening there in the benefits of everybody. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, many people in the tech community are big fans of democratizing. And I think as a general principle, like it's the right thing to do, like give everyone access to it. But is the right thing to do to say, we've developed a new technology, like a new version of the technology. We don't know how safe or dangerous it is. But instead of checking this, like, and we can't just check it in like one day. Like these are hard things to do. But we're just going to put it out there to the public and see what happens. Like, I don't think that's the right thing to do either. So I don't think we're democratizing necessarily in the right way. So there's now pushes to see, can we build like entities, for example, through the UN that can again like be involved in kinds of regulation, or make sure that there's a player in the space that's more aligned with the interests of like the global population. I think there's got to be some sort of middle ground that we haven't quite hit on yet. I'm not a governance person, so I don't quite know what that looks like, but I think these are the right questions to be asking, because it feels like the extremes have their own risks, and so you probably want something more in the middle.
I want to talk about the LLM, large language models. I think that's one of the projects that you're working on. And from my understanding, there are many African countries that have their own dialects and the languages, and you want to combine them. And I think that's just interspersing everybody together. I think that's a fascinating phenomenon. Can you talk talk a little bit about that, and maybe we can even expand LLM into a global language model, perhaps.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So, LLMs, large language models, are like all the rage now. All these big AI models we're working with are these large language models. And again, their kind of principle is they're next word predictors. So they've encountered enough data like on the internet that when you type something to it or talk to it, it can respond to you, and it can do that generally in English. And firstly, it will construct reasonable sentences, and then it's going to respond to what you wanted. So it's understanding the content of what you're talking about. And then because it's got access to all this data it was trained on, and many cases it can also search online, it's able to pull together all these resources to answer you. Now, that's great if you speak English, or other kind of dominant languages. And what we mean by that would be, or we think of them as high resource languages. So to train these models, they need to see a ton of data on that language, right? So like the overwhelming majority of like stuff on the internet is in English. So it's really easy to see a lot of that in whatever topic you care about. In Africa, we've got something like 2,000 languages. And pretty much
2,000, wow.
Yeah. And pretty much all of them are what we call low resource. So there's very little written, there might be thousands of documents, but that's like nothing compared to what's needed for English, right? Now, and in fact, some of these languages, there's like no written documents at all. Now, the challenge is the paradigm that we've used to train these systems. So the particular kinds of machine learning systems we've used to build large language models are really just based on the idea that the more data you throw at these things and the more compute power you throw at these things, the better they get. Okay, which is great if you're in English or Mandarin or French or something. But the second you go to a language like Mongolia that doesn't have that same scale of data, that paradigm doesn't work. And this is the problem we face in Africa. And in fact, in many parts of the world. But like, if this isn't, the convenient thing is that if you are a dominant language, there's probably a lot of you, which means if someone's building like products for you, they can get a lot of money for it. Right? If you've got a small language group that's not hugely profitable to go and invest in that. So I think what's important is for different parts of the world and different communities to be building their own large language models. And in fact, not just large language models, other kinds of natural language processing, which is what we call the broader area around AI that works with language. And I think this is critical for a couple of reasons. One, for the people on the ground, if we're inventing all this crazy new technology, like these people need to have access to it as well, either for the sake of accessing it, to have the power of all of it, but even for simpler things like if people have, if because of the way technology is evolving, we're better able to offer financial products to people because there's an AI system that can analyze your spending patterns and offer you the right products. If there's not enough people in your demographic, you're getting worse products. So it's important that these people don't just have access to AI, but also whatever AI would enable. But even at the broader kind of perspective, I think that means we're doing AI wrong. Because, again, if this has been largely built out of these huge centers like the US and China, where there's a lot of data, there's a lot of speakers of those languages, like that's the obvious thing. If you speak that language and you've got access to those resources, it would be really silly of you not to use that. Okay? But that doesn't work for everyone else. And so I think there's an opportunity there for anyone who's coming from these low resource settings they have to think about the problem differently. And I think they could find a better solution to the problem because they have to. They have to do this, what we call frugal innovation, is like innovating with less resources, right? If you don't have all the money and all the resources, you've actually got to be more intelligent. And I think there's so many great opportunities for people that don't come from these dominant languages or dominant cultures to be more innovative and say, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Right.
We know as humans, right? Like, for me to learn English is my first language. I was in that way lucky. I didn't have to read all of the internet to learn English, right? We know the brain can be more efficient than that. So we know it should be possible to do that. Now, like, again, so there's this flip side of like, not only can we provide, if we invest in this, better services for our people, but also we can maybe build better technology for the whole planet. So what's interesting in Africa is there's so many different languages, but they're all like many of them are related. There's different language groups. And so we've been able to start looking at, like, can we pool different languages together? Can we be creative about the way we collect data? I know there's people that have spent a lot of time trying to digitize things like print media. Other people that have been running, that have built systems that are recording things off radios and podcasts in those languages to collect more data. But then a lot of people also trying to think about new, like, algorithmic and technical solutions. So to this extent, with a few colleagues, I started a company called Lalapa AI, which is an African-based company aimed at building these solutions for Africa.
That's amazing.
And, you know, again, we're starting with a very small set of languages that are some of the bigger ones that, again, affect more people, that there's more data out there. But we've had to be able to innovate in everything from collecting data, finding clever ways to do that, to trying to innovate on the technology.
In short, you've got a guy from Somalia and then another person from Eritrea, and they speak different language. And you want to collect enough data to make sure that they're going to understand each other through AI.
That would be the aim. We're not thinking exactly like that, but what we are thinking is like, maybe you've only got so much data in each of these, but if the languages are similar, maybe your AI can use the different languages to help understand that group of languages better. So, you know, I think, but that's based on our human recognition of like how our languages have developed and where we're able to draw on the strengths of the relationships. And again, like, so in the history of AI, there's always been different schools of thought. Some people believe that human knowledge is really important, and we've got to build systems that have a lot of human knowledge, like that we build into it, and then they only need a little bit of data to be able to do stuff. And there's other people that say, no, we don't need human knowledge, we just need human data. Let's find all the data in the universe and throw it into this thing, and we'll figure out the knowledge by itself. That's the dominant form at the moment, but there's ways to bridge between them. So if you know something, like our LLMs that we use, like our chat GPTs and things, nobody's gone there and formally built into it the rules of English grammar. It figured that out by just reading enough books, basically.
Right.
So if you've got formal education stuff, you should be able to build a better way of doing this. That, you know, if I could give you the dictionary and give you formal lessons in a language, you don't need to see as much data out there in the world. So you can be clever about the way you fuse human knowledge from different places, that makes it easier to learn. And this is what this kind of challenge is all about. And again, I think this is really important for every community to find a way of empowering their people, their demographics, their language groups, which could have the effect of just improving AI globally as well.
Манай подкастын хамтран ажиллагчаар Tenger Travel ажиллаж байгаа. Дэлхийн 10 гаруй орны 30 гаруй хөтөлбөрөөр жилийн 4 үйлрэл ингэж ажиллаулж байгаа, явуулж байгаа хүмүүсийг. За тэгээд Tenger Travel маань бүр 2004 оноос хойш үйл ажиллагаагаа явуулж байгаа. Одоо 20 жилийн өмнө бол дутаа гүмбэн Бээжин рүү одоо явж исэн бол одоо тий. Тэгээд дахиад цаашаа 2005 6 оноос чинь ингээд бүр газрын яваач гэдэг одоо Хайнан руу. За тэгээд ер нь гой нөгөө ялангуяа одоо өвлийн үйлрлэлээр бол 7 орнууд бол байгаа юм л да. Хайнан, Чежу, одоо Дубай, Сингапур, Вьетнам гэдэг. Тэгээ бүр ингээ Мят, Хүннүвэр, Изинистэй ингээд ер нь л тэргүүлэх airline компаниудтай бас ингэж хамтарч ажиллаж байгаа. Дэлхийд дахны хөгжил, цэцэглэл, бүтээн байгуулалт энэ сайхан зүйлсийг одоо дэлхийдээ мөр зэрэгцэн алхахад хүмүүсийнхаа нүдийг тайлахад одоо их сайхан буянтай бизнес хийдэг ийм газар бол Tenger Travel бол мэдээж бол байгаа. За тэгээ бүр 2006 оноос бол одоо нөгөө бидний байнга одоо явдаг Зүүн Азийн, Таиланд, Сингапур, Малайз, Хонконг, Макао гар бол аялуулж ирсэн. Одоо бидний л одоо аялал жуулчлалын анхны сайхан гүүр нь болж исэн гэж хэлж болно. Тэгээд Tenger Travel бас айгүй тийм airline юунууд дундаа энэ салбар дундаас айгүй тийм creative бүтээлч бол байдаг. Та бүхэн санаж байгаа бол 12 онд та аялмаар байна уу гэж телевизэн шоу хийжсэн. Сая ноднон 2024 онд бол одоо 20 жил 20 азтан гэдэг хөрхөн уралдааныг бас зохион байгуулсан байгаа. Тэгээд мэдээж мэрэгжлийн найдвартай, хүртээмжтэй. За тэгээд ийм сайхан компани тэгээд шинэ өнгө төрхтэйгээр үйлчлэгээ стандарт чанарыг баримталж байгаа мэрэгжлийн аяллаа менежер, хөтөч нараараа дамжуул үйлчлүүлэгчтэй хамгийн найдвартай итгэл даах аяллаа зөвлөгөө үйлчлэгээ хүргэсээр байгаа. За тэгээд одоо 200 мянган аялагчдыг бол аялуулад байгаа. Тэгээд Tenger Travel-ийнхэн бас баярлалаа. Yeah, the latter school of thought, which is being dominant, has been interesting because the board game Go, like you just said, right? The AI beat the best player, and then it had a whole different set of creativity, new thinking. And maybe the purpose is not to imitate human intelligence. Maybe it's to build new type of intelligence.
Exactly.
Right?
But it
Now-
seems good to start with human intelligence,
Well,
and then take it
that's
from
the
there.
best one we have right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, hope so. By the way, I had to learn English, and the process sucked.
Right.
I hated it. But here we are, right? Oh, going back to LLMs, the one thing that fascinates me in life is a calendar
Okay.
where universally we all accept that this is the end of 2025.
Whatever that
Right.
means.
Whatever that means, 2025. Whether you're from a small village, whether you're from Spain, Mongolia, South Africa, everywhere we collectively know this is December 2025. And to me, that's fascinating. Like, when did we collectively do that, right? Because we could all have different calendars. We could talk about the Lunar New Year, but this is it. Now, we have to grasp how fascinating this is. And in the same breath, potentially, I don't know how many years into the future, but using the large language model, universally throughout the world, every single person can understand each other through one language model. Is that the future we're expecting?
I think that would be amazing.
Right?
Like, just
It's the same
imagine
thing as a
you
calendar.
could talk to anyone. Yeah.
Right.
Like, you could be in the middle of like a country on the exact opposite side of the world and like have a conversation with someone. I can't see that being bad for humanity. Like, that sounds amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that will happen. I wonder then
Yeah?
about the dynamics around this. What will that mean for our individual languages? I hope that doesn't mean, maybe that means we preserve them because small communities will maybe
Right.
still speak those languages. There's less pressure for them to be like dominated by bigger languages. Of course, the opposite could happen. This is interesting.
I think it's like this. Let's say the production industry, let's say handbags, right? For years, we wanted to automate the production. But now, the handcrafted bags are more expensive,
Right.
right?
Because we respect that human like
the
touch.
authenticity,
Exactly.
right? I think that's the future maybe we're expecting in the future, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it'll be like, it's so cool. I can talk to you without needing a piece of technology to translate.
Exactly.
Like that's like we've got our secret language we can communicate.
Right. And I think that would open up so many opportunities because we can't even begin to imagine what a person from South America and then a person from China, for example, the communication barriers, how many opportunities may be lost, right?
Yeah, and then you know once you can just speak the same language, then you discover, oh wait, this person also likes to barbecue. This person also has an uncle in their family that drives them mad. And like, you might find that this is a way to just build bridges between people that otherwise would never have had anything to do with each other.
And it's not, when we're talking just from a simple society standpoint, obviously we can communicate with each other, and then maybe we're not that different after all.
Exactly.
Why do we have to be only similar to those who speak the same language or who look like us? Right?
But we'll never tell that if we can't communicate with them.
Absolutely.
It's that idea that there's probably a lot more we all have in common than is different between us.
Exactly. Yeah. One of the projects that you're working on is to ultimately build AI sovereignty in the continent of Africa. What does it mean to have an AI sovereignty and become a creator instead of someone like me who simply uses ChatGPT?
So, we spoke about this a bit with the languages, but I think,
Right.
What you want anywhere for like a kind of effective ecosystem, like say a tech ecosystem in this case, you need a bit of everybody, right? So I often think, there's this kind of pipeline, at least coming from an academic perspective of, we start with like theoretical research that then turns into applied research that then turns into like things getting commercialized and being used by everybody. And to some extent, you can think of this as like, you have your Einsteins of the world that come up with like relativity.
Right.
And then based on that, you put GPS satellites into orbit. And based on that, you can have like GPS systems on your phone or your smartwatch. And then based on that, you can have like fitness apps, right? And this whole pipeline is important. Now, you've always typically got a lot more people sitting downstream in that process, doing the applications type stuff. I feel strongly that you want the entire pipeline to be like in every kind of geographic area, right? So maybe all your major innovations aren't coming out of everywhere equally. I think that should be the aim ultimately. But why I think it's important is for a number of reasons. One, if you're just basing your very downstream stuff on things that are built somewhere else in the world, there's a few risks there. One, like potential economic risks, like geopolitics is an unfortunate reality of our world.
Right.
If something happens way out of any of our control, you don't want to lose access to all your technology. You want at least some people in your ecosystem that understand that technology and can, work to provide you with something. I think there's economic reasons as well. You don't necessarily want to be sending subscription fees to the other side of the world as well, because it's not always the right thing to do. If you've got the people in your system that understand these technologies, they can tell you which is the right technology to use. They can sometimes say nothing's appropriate, we need to build our own thing. They can tell when technologies are imported into your country. Are there different risk profiles to these things we should be thinking about? So to me, it really means that like a healthy ecosystem has people playing at each part of the pipeline. That's really what I care about. I'm not saying like we should never use technology built anywhere else. In fact, I think it's good to use technology built anywhere else. In fact, what you probably want ultimately is like, if you're using AI to communicate with people, you should use this tool that's built in the US. But if you're using AI to help you do your financial analysis, you should use this tool built in Japan. But if you're using AI to do something else, you should use this locally built tool. And again, I think you want this rich set of options. I think that makes it, again, better for everybody. But we should be thinking about all of these as being global. Like if you've got a local ecosystem, they should be trying to have a global footprint and a global impact. Right. But again, you don't just want to be dependent on stuff from other places and have no deep expertise in your own system. I mean, even to some of the kind of philosophical and sociological questions we spoke about earlier, I think it helps to have local experts that, like, let's say you were in a setting where you didn't have the local experts, but you were really strong on, say, governance. Then your people working in governance don't have the appropriate people to talk to inform them about, like, how, say, AI is developing. They'd have to go somewhere else to have those conversations, which again is good. But, like, you want those strengths that your community is really interdisciplinary, has all the different voices in it. And that to me is really important.
When it comes to AI development, I think the whole world is more or less at the same starting point. This is a new concept.
Yeah.
Because, with a country like Mongolia, there's no way that we will catch China or Germany or United States in car manufacturing. Like, we're already behind. We're used, right? But with AI, I think there are opportunities. Obviously, you've got countries in Africa, right, that you're working on. In a country like Mongolia, how can we? Obviously, we can do the hardware stuff. It costs. It's pretty costly. But through software, through algorithms, and even through I guess just structures, right? Infrastructures and human resources, our capabilities. What opportunity is there for Mongolia and countries like ours?
So from the limited time that I've spent here already, I'm already getting this idea that there's a very strong education system here in Mongolia. That there's quite unique challenges. I mean, many that have echoes around other parts of the world, but it's a very resilient people and place as well. And I think these are like the right kind of ingredients that you need, because the beautiful thing about kind of the software world and the AI world is that you can do this stuff from anywhere. Right. And this we're seeing, like, amazing people popping up all over, like Africa, for example. Often self-taught, but what there's a superpower as well in having community. That seems to be a strong value here as well. And so if you've got a lot of people that are like-minded, that are innovative, entrepreneurial, excited, can bounce ideas off each other and iterate on things really fast, I think that's a really good position to be in. So, I think there's certainly the potential to, say, start figuring out how do we take this technology and use it to tackle our local problems, and then broaden out from there to say, okay, if we're building solutions to, like, a local problem, how do we think about this? Like, what impact could this have globally? Can we help people in other places as well? And, like, start, like, rapid iteration on this innovation cycle that can lead to new companies, to new research ideas, to new projects. And I think in the long term, this could have a huge impact, because as I say, I think you've got the right people, they're connected in the right kind of way. They've just got to kind of believe in themselves and jump into it.
Манай подкастын хамтран ажиллагчаар 101 жилийн түүхтэй нэгэн гайхалтай компани бол орж ирсэн. За энэ бол MG Motors. Би бол өөрөө MG Motors-оос бол одоо машина бол авсан байгаа. За тэгээд ер нь бол одоо энэ чанарын хувьд идэлгээ даах, бат бөх байдал, найдвартай байдлаар бол алдартай. Английн бол MG Motors гэдэг брэнд бол байгаа. Тэгээд та бүхнийг бас одоо мэдээж тийм ээ машин тэрэгнийхээ хэрэглээг сонгох бол MG Motors-ыг бол бас зөвлөмөр байгаа. Тэгээ үний хувьд бол ерөөсөө 40 сая төгрөг байхад одоо ер нь бол эхлээд те урьдчилгаанд ингээд 10% төлөөд эсвэл ингээд банк болон банкус санхүүгээс бол одоо авах бол боломжтой. 40 сая төгрөгийн үнэтэй машин байгаа. За тэгээд 10%-ийг бол урьдчилгаанд төлж ингэж авах бол банкар болон банкус санхүүгээр бол дамжуулан авах бол боломжтой байгаа. За тэгээд нэг албан ёсны эрхтэй учраас нөгөө сэлбэг захиалга, засвар үйлчлэгээг бол ингэж албан ёсоор хийж байгаа. За тэгээд мэдээж дэлгэрэнгүй мэдээллийг 75 55 тэг дугаараас одоо авах боломжтой байгаа шүү. Хамтран ажиллагч MG Motors. We've got a lot of bright young minds and obviously educated folks in Mongolian I would say the next generation is very, very aware of what to expect. And, thanks to everything around us, I guess it's the same with every country where we have this more or less similar access to what everybody else is accessing, right? And do you think it's important to try to compete or contribute at the global level and then learn the know-hows and then try to implement it locally? Or do you think it's important to just tackle the local problems?
I think both are feasible ways forward. The reality is, what's cool about AI as well is that, like, it's the fastest growing field of knowledge in human history. Right. So, which on the one hand means that it's basically impossible for a single person to keep up with it. Like, it really is. But again, if there's a group of people, it becomes doable. But all that information's online. Unfortunately, generally, you need to speak English to have access to it. But it's still there.
That's fine.
I mean that's okay. But, like, I think, so you've got that. And if a group of people just want to dive in and do things, I'm a fan of this kind of philosophy of iterating fast. You jump in and try something.
Right.
And you see what happens, and you adapt, and you change, and you try again, and you iterate on this. This is very much the kind of almost Silicon Valley mindset. So they often say, the wrong way to build a company, a startup, would be you have an idea, and you're like, okay, we've been thinking.
Be careful is the wrong way.
Yeah. In a sense, it's like, okay, we've been thinking what the world needs is this thing. Okay, now we're going to go and sit in a garage and build this thing for the next 5 years. Okay, so we sit there and we work hard at it, and then we come out, we say, hey, world, we built the thing, and the world never needed that thing, so no one cares. But if you say, okay, I've got an idea, we think the world needs this thing, let's give ourselves a couple months and then try it. And the world say, no, we didn't need that. What we actually needed was this thing. You say, okay, wait, we can do that. We can tweak this and change that. Now we've got this thing. It's like, ooh, that's interesting. We need a bit more of this and a bit less of that. And you do this iteration, and you just keep moving fast. You don't worry about failure. Failure happens. It's part of learning. But if you keep kind of regularly making contact with your market. Now, your market might be people buying your thing. It might be the people you're trying to help. It might be the research community. As long as you keep checking in and saying, like, are we on the right track? Is this kind of trying to solve the problem we set out to solve? You very quickly find that you get into the niche you need. And it's just about that kind of being brave, taking the first step and trying something. Things always work out eventually.
Yeah, and in accordance with one of your projects, I've read about the crazy idea science, right? And so, what is a crazy idea that you have encountered upon, or something that you would entertain?
I love all crazy ideas.
Okay,
I think,
what?
So to that, the context maybe around that is, so I recently started an AI institute at my university, the University of the Witwatersrand, in Johannesburg, South Africa. And part of the thinking behind this was, to make bigger impact. I really want a home of kind of theoretical thinking and AI in Africa, which doesn't really exist otherwise at this point. But to do something like that, my philosophy was I need critical mass. I need a lot of people thinking about this. Now, we've got, again, very resource-strapped community. There's, compared to kind of Europe and the US, there's like a very small number of AI researchers there. So I tried to think more broadly about this, and we really building on those ideas we spoke about earlier around kind of artificial natural intelligence. That's what our institute's about. So it's about bringing together a whole lot of academics. We've got 36 at the moment that think about some aspect of intelligence, whether it's artificial or natural. So about a third of them are AI people, but then we've got neuroanatomists and neuropsychologists and philosophers and people studying brain evolution, and we've got some creatives, and we've got people in governance and law, and anyone that's interested in some aspect of, like, intelligent machines, intelligent people, intelligent animals. How do these things interact with each other, and so on? So we've got this group of people, and the way I'm trying to get it to work is the idea is you put a bunch of smart people in a box, shake it up, and see what magic comes out of it. So we have these people together, we do regular meetings, and we try and like incentivize and encourage new project ideas, but they have to have at least 2 people involved from at least 2 different disciplines. And so this has already started giving us some interesting ideas, and a couple of the ones that I think are quite cool and crazy are one, we've got a group, there's a kind of a psychologist, there's an engineer, and there's an anatomist that are asking questions about, can we emulate sleep deprivation in large language models? So can we say, we understand something about sleep deprivation in humans, can we try and make the same things happen in large language models? The same, like, how the longer you've been awake, the worse you perform,
right?
But in particular ways. So can we get large language models to act in the same way? And then does that tell us something about their failure modes? Can that tell us something about how humans fail? And can it shed some light into both systems? And I think that's kind of a crazy idea.
Right.
Like, how do we understand these very primitive circuits in our brain in that way? Another crazy idea that some of us are looking at is around, can we understand the language of elephants? Elephants have apparently 3 different ways of generating sounds for communicating with each other, and the kind of idea from the guys that have worked with them, particularly in understanding how their brains work, is that if we look at the one modality, we should be able to find some signal there. And so we've been looking at, like, can we try and figure out when and how and why are they communicating? And if we can maybe start looking for regular patterns in the sounds. And the goal would be, imagine we could build a large language model that can translate between humans and elephants.
Right. Also, can we, let's say that we do have some understanding of elephants, and then we learn the collective movement of ants, for example, and just learning from nature in general, right? And then can we incorporate that into our, like, I've always been fascinated with the eagles, eyes, right? Their eyesight, that they can see from, I believe, 5 kilometers away, right? Is there something that we can insert into our lives? Would that be one of the purposes potentially?
I mean, totally. You could imagine saying, like, there's this amazing structure, the eagle's eye, that nature has developed, and we can draw insights from that. We could build, like, really cool technology. On the other hand, maybe by understanding these animals better, we get a better idea of, like, having respect for them and being able to, conserve them in different ways and appreciate different aspects of them. And again, maybe in some way that changes our relationship to them, of, like, can we publicize that, like, we think we're in some way better than these other animals, but actually in this way these ones are better, in this way these ones are better, and we're just exactly part of the whole system.
За подкастын маань хамтран ажиллагчаар Ekos цэвэр ус маань бол ажиллаж байгаа. За тэгээд хүн ер нь одоо хоол ундандаа бол 80% шүлтлэг, 20% хүчлэлэг юм хоол унд хэрглэж ингэж балансыг бол барьдаг юм байна. За тэгээд Ekos цэвэр ус маань бол юм олон давхар мембран шүүлтүүрээр шүүгдэж, тийм ээ. Одоо хүний биед нэн шаардлагатай байгалийн хужраар ирсчүүлсэн савладаг ийм pH 8.5 гэдэг одоо зөөлөн шүлтлэг ус байдаг. За тэгээд Монгол хүний хооллолтын онцлог дээр бас тулгуурлан бүтээгдсэн гэдгээр их онцлог юм байна. Тэгээд хамтарч ажиллаж байгаа Ekos-той бас талархал илэрхийлье.
pH 8.5-тай шүлтлэг зөөлөн ус. Ekos. Энэ таны эрүүл сонголт.
May I throw in a crazy idea?
Do it.
I've always been fascinated about the strength of humans. And I think that humans have a ridiculous amount of strength when under extreme pressure. When you're about to drown, when you're getting chased by a dog. You're
running away, you
you're
never knew you
running
could,
like
yeah.
you never did, right? And there's the ethical issue with experimentation. So can we let's get neuroscientists in there. Let's test it with other animals. Let's get psychologists. And can we somehow try to utilize AI to figure out what the actual potential of human strength is, and not having them almost drown, but through different kind of more ethical or moral experimentation? Is that something that we can do to optimize a human strength?
I think totally. I mean, this is something that I think is amazing. If you can get an AI system that in some way performs equivalently to humans, or in some way has similar kind of or an analogous brain structure to humans, like just in a particular way, then you can ask these questions. You can probe and cut and pull apart in ways that you couldn't do. I mean, we've been trying this in all sorts of different ways, and I think that's exactly some of the appeal of doing this kind of work, is to say these can be like proxies for us. So there's so much we don't know about how we work.
Right.
That maybe this is the way to get it. So I don't know. We'd have to think about, how do we get a dog to chase an LLM, and what does that look like? But like, it would be cool if we're convinced that, in some ways these things are equivalent,
Right.
and we put that pressure on it. How does it respond?
Right.
And then can we predict maybe how humans might respond? And like, I think this is how we do interesting science.
Right. And I think the cuter way of kind of looking at this is, how babies, they would just grab onto their food, and then you try to open their hand, and that makes you question your own strength, right? Because babies don't know how to control their strength, right? Because that's what I've been fascinated with. And obviously another thing is with space, right? Black holes and just speed of light, manipulating space in general, and how we can maybe have intergalactic travels. And I think AI, and even combined with quantum computing, look, you guys can probably do some amazing stuff there.
So I reckon if it's possible to travel great distances in space, then we'll do that through AI and not without it.
Right.
I think that will unlock the door. Like, maybe there's laws of physics that say we'll never be able to do that. Okay, that's one thing. But if it is at all possible, we're going to figure out how to do it with AI.
Right. Or just defy the laws of physics with
maybe,
superhuman intelligence. Right? Because, like, before the interview, that's what we're talking about. We can be imaginative here, right? And one of the things that I'm fascinated with is quantum computing.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you see quantum computing reshaping the future of machine learning?
So this is an interesting one, and there's a lot of speculation, and I'm maybe a bit more on the skeptical side. I don't know that much about how these things come together. There's a lot of work starting to happen on like quantum machine learning, for example.
Right.
I think the place that, at least to me, what seems obvious, the place that like quantum is going to have a bigger impact, or the most, the soonest impact, will be on more things like our privacy and encryption and that sort of thing, which I think is going to force us to change the way we think about our data, our private communications. And I suspect, my gut feeling is it's going to shake up that whole world before it'll certainly start accelerating certain aspects of AI. But I think that kind of change, like something that we've thought about for the last few decades as like just a basis of our digital infrastructure, we're going to have to change all of that. And I think there'll be huge downstream ramifications that'll touch all the other technology we're building. So that's kind of my gut feeling on where that's going to go. But like, that's a technology that's even earlier in its development. So it's even harder to predict what's going to happen with that. But I'm pretty sure that it's going to unfold in ways we don't expect.
Right. Because, with quantum computing technology in general, you can probably be very specific about, like, especially with healthcare, right? Very specific about the diagnosis of a disease. Or, one thing that I always wonder is with cyber security, where quantum computing can make it virtually impossible for it to hack it. But then the hackers would use quantum computing as well, right? It's the chicken or the egg thing. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Like all of our encryption at the moment, from what I understand, could be relatively easily broken with quantum, right? Which means you need a new way of thinking about your cybersecurity, which is probably quantum itself. But like, I don't think we've got anywhere near enough research happening in that space. So, again, we might find this to be the kind of thing where we're chugging along with our systems, and one day they all fall over and like throws the world into chaos, and we've got to quickly figure out what the next kind of system is. And I mean, this is where I'm pretty sure the next few decades are going to be wildly exciting.
yes, absolutely, right? And and I really appreciate that you're coming on to our podcast and having this wonderful talk. Obviously, we can keep talking about the exciting phenomena, but the one thing that we do, and one of the terrible things that we do to our audience, is that we finish our interview on the high. Everybody's like, okay, what's going to happen? And then we just finish it up, right? It's it may be an Asian thing where if you see Korean drama, they always leave you with the cliffhanger, all right? Making everybody, keeping them want more, things like that. But yeah, Mr. Benjamin Rosman, it's been a pleasure. It's been amazing. And I hope that the rest of your days in Mongolia will treat you well. We're very hospitable people.
I'm learning that already.
Right. Good people, good food, beautiful women. I gotta say it. It's just factually accurate. And there's a Mongolian saying that if you stay warm, then you're worth more than $1,000. So I think it's more than dollars, but you got to stay warm. You can't get cold. And I appreciate you coming here and having this wonderful talk with us.
No, thanks. This has been so much fun, and I'm loving my time in Mongolia already.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'll be back. And
please do.
No, this is fantastic. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And hopefully we can probably, through our platform, what our hope, me and my team, our hope is that maybe we can work together in building a bridge when it comes to, AI research, AI projects in the future. And hopefully we can have some middle ground to work on that. And obviously you've got a team out there to facilitate with that as well.
I would love that.
Yeah, we would love to cooperate in the future.
Great.
And thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. It's been wonderful, and I hope you guys had just as much as fun as I did. Тэгээд та бүхэн маань таалагдсан байх гэж найдаж байна. Удахгүй бид нар бас орчуулгатаа оруулах болно. Энэ удаа орчуулгагүй оруулчихъя. Тэгээд мэдээж чухал поинтуудыг ч гэсэн тастаж авч явах та рeel болгохтой оруулна гэж бодож байна. Саруулханд Монгол хүн та бид энэ ярилцлагыг үзсэн. Маш их баярлалаа. Та бүхэнд бие махбодын болон сэтгэл санааны эрүүл мэндийг хүсье. Ирээдүй ийм гайхалтай ирээдүй хүлээж байгаа. Та бүхэндээ эрхчлөө хүсье. Өөртөө хүсдэг бүх сайхан зүйлсийг хүсье. Mr. Benjamin Rosman байлаа. Until next time. Баярлалаа. Yeah. Сайн бацхан саруулханд монголчуудаа. Mono English Bookstore-тай хамтран хүргэдэг ээлжит weekly book review 7 хоногийн номны хураангуй эхлэхэд бэлэн болсон. За тэгээд дэлхийн топ 100 AI нөлөөлөгчтэй нэг Benjamin Rosman орсон дугаар дээр мэдээж artificial intelligence хиймэл оюун ухааны Oxford-ийн хэвлэлийн энэ хувилбарыг та бүхэнд бас хүргэж байна. Artificial intelligence Margaret Boatны энэ маш гоё inspirational ийм зүйлс байгаа. За тэгээд мэдээж Benjamin Rosman бит хоёр бол хиймэл оюун ухааны концептыг бол ярьсан. За хиймэл оюун ухаан дээр бол мэдээж энэчээ бол ялангуяа хамгийн ихний хэсэг дээр бол нөгөө юу ярьж илээ. AGI гэдэг энэ зүйлийг бол ярьсан байгаа. Artificial General Intelligence гэдэг ерөнхийдөө хиймэл ерөнхий мэдлэг гэж байгаа. Тэгээд энэ нь бол AGI гэдэг зүйл бол 2029 он гэхэд бол нэгсэндээ бүрэн хөгжинэ гэдэг таамаг байгаад байгаа юм байна лээ. Тэгээ энэнийг яг ямар учиртай юм бэ гэдэг энэ номон дээр нарийн дэлгэрэнгүй задлж байгаа. Одоо жишээ нь амар сайн хувцас эвхдэг робот байлаа гэхэд тэр робот зөвхөн хувцас эвхэж чадна. Гэтэл хүн хувцас эвхэхийн хажуугаар маш олон зүйл хийж чадна. Тэгэхээр тэр general гэж байгаа ерөнхий гэдэг тэр мэдлэг дээр 2029 онд ингэж хүрэх төлөвтэй байгаа. Бүр улмаар цаашаа superintelligence гэдэг 2050 он гэхэд бол бүр хүн төрөлхтнөөс илүү давж гарах ийм нөхцөл байдал руу бол ингэж орж байгаа. Энэ бол бүр ингээд юу маш олон төрлийн өөр төрлийн хиймэл оюун ухаан нэмтийг бол тайлбарлаж байгаа. Хиймэл оюун ухаан гэж яг юу вэ гэж супер компьютер хүртэл хангалтгүй гэдэг. Одоо нөгөө Benjamin Butler ярьсан дээр энэ language, creativity, emotion гэдэг 3 дахь chapter дээр байна л да. Тэгэхээр хүний хэл, хүний бүтээлч байдал, хүний эмоц, тийм ээ, зан характер энийг AI хэрхэн даган дуурайх боломжтой юм бэ? Яг одоогийн байдлаар бол боломжгүй байгаа. Энэ бол хүний эмоц, хүний инээмсэглэлийг хүртэл гарч ирэхэд их боломжгүй байгаа. Гэхдээ ямар хувилбарууд байж болох уу гэдгийг. Энэ бол хиймэл оюун ухааны салбар бол өөрөө 1960-аад оноос хойш бол эхлэлтэй. За тэгэхээр бол одоо very short introduction гэдэг нэртэй. Тэнгүүт одоо ер нь бол хиймэл оюун ухаан гэдэг магадгүй тэр бүтээлч байж чадах, ухаалаг байж чадах, эсвэл бүр ингээд ухамсартай. Одоо би оршин буй байна гэж тийм үү. Дотроо үзэл бодолтой ийм байж болох уу гэдэг энэ талаар бол гүнзгий deep dive хийсэн байгаа. Тэгээд хиймэл оюун ухаан сонирхож байгаа хэн бүхэн хиймэл оюун ухааныг бол бас сонирхосоо гэж бодож байгаа. Ялангуяа 14-өөс 18 насны хүүхдүүд, 18-аас 22 насны оюутан залуучууд ч гэсэндээ ирээдүйд бидний ирээдүйд хиймэл оюун ухаан тодорхойлно шүү. Benjamin Rosmanтай бол хиймэл оюун ухаан market value буюу зах зээлийн үнцнийг бол яриаггүй. Гэтэ хиймэл оюун ухаантай эдийн засгт оруулж байгаа үнц нь бол хэдэн 100 тэрбум $. Яригдж байгаа юм билэ. Хэдэн тэгээд нийт бүр эдийн засгийнхаа энэ эргэлдэж байгаа мөнгийг нь бодох юм бол бүр $1 trillion хүртэл яригдж байгаа юм билэ. Тэгэхээр бидний амьдрал бол зайлшгүй хэрэгтэй энэ концепт. Тэгээ та бүхэн бас artificial intelligence-ыг Mono English Bookstore-оос авч уншаарай. Мэдлэгээр чигүүрлээ. Mono English Bookstore.